Welcome to Basement Tales with Sam Jackman, Charlie Einsman, Ed Grass, and Sandra Delancey. We have fun telling crazy but true stories about turning the worst possible property disasters into bags of money. Along the way, we'll pass along some important lessons to help you make cash on real estate. Sam and Charlie walked away from cubicle hell 25 years ago. Starting with no property, they created their own Clear Sky group of companies, sold hundreds of houses, bought dozens of rentals, and made millions in hard money loans. I'm Ed, a big firm litigator until muscular dystrophy made me find a hobby other than suing people. I miss it. Sandra's the normal person here with a real job plus some rentals. Her decades of friendship with the group, from office flunkies to property gurus, might help keep us all humble and focused on learning something. I wouldn't count on it. Well, if you're off the clock, then you're on rental at the hour. Like, what's the latest on your rental situation? Are they in? Or?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Ed, for that lead in to the leak that started happening in the place that
Oh no, really? I had no idea what happened.
Thank you, Ed. Did you know about this?
No. What happened?
I don't know. My tenant called. They've been in there since the 16th, so it's 11 days already. They have a pot in their kitchen in the middle of the floor with water in it. Saying, this started happening this morning. I'm like, oh, great. Well, we knew that something might happen, so this is the first thing that happened. I was hoping I'd get past day 11, but it is what it is.
I figured this is weird. Did Sam have anything to do with the repairs? I mean, why is it leaking?
I did get a text while I was doing my C-level work in a C-like manner, a C-grade manner.
Right.
Oh, C like SEA, a sea of water coming in through your roof repair.
So what happened? Where was the water coming from?
Nothing yet. I don't know. We're both at work today, so we have not been able to get over there to check it out. But and then I got, half of the house, the lights went out in half of the house. I'm like, okay, well, probably related to, the water getting into something that, flip the switch. So I'll go down to the circuit box and take care of that. So they went down to the circuit box and flipped it back on, and the lights are back on. I was like, well, we need to figure out how to turn the water off in this house. So that's something that we need to learn how to do. So learn where your shutoffs are in these houses. So I need to know where the water shutoff is and where the gas shut off.
That's actually really good advice. I had that come up a lot with my rentals, like and not just, first of all, people don't even know like the shut off by the toilet, right? When there's some leak there that's coming out, but like the main shut off for the house, nobody ever knows. And then after I had my properties a couple of years, I had no idea where to find it anymore. One of them, it's like hidden to find the darn thing. So were they able to shut the water?
Do they have water now? What's the situation?
Well, they didn't turn it off, but I was like, we're going to have to, I wish we could have gone over sooner, but, Derek is on his way over there now. So he'll go and figure out, where all the shutoffs are. That's the first thing. He was brushing your teeth at the time. I'm like, I'm sure this isn't from brushing your teeth, because we ran the water for, quite a long time from the sink, there when we moved in. So it must be something in the tub area, because we never really used the tub. So there is a access panel in the bedroom behind the tub. So I think Derek will kind of look in that area first and see if there's anything wet back there. And we'll have to get a plumber to come in and take a look. And we're going to have to open up the ceiling, I would imagine.
Oh, yuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you could just do what I did and decide to be a terrible landlord. No, that's not true. We'd fix it. Well, of course, that's the problem, is you're stuck. I mean, even if you want to be a terrible landlord, it's just going to do more damage if you don't fix it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we will have to fix it. And then I'm going to bill the people that sold me this house.
Yeah. Bill that C-level. Yeah, C-level executive.
C-level deal with that. Yeah.
Who would have stuck you with a place like? Oh, I see. That's why Sam and Charlie do this stuff by Zoom. You can't reach them and strangle them.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, how many days into it before we're not responsible for the leaking pipe?
111. How about
100 days?
That number. Yeah.
Got a 100-day warranty.
Yes, let's go with that.
Okay, so I got to tell one little story. related
Oh
to
no!
this.
I thought we were having a Charlie story.
Charlie,
today.
we're gonna do it. We're gonna do Charlie's story. But we're talking about leaks. We're talking about checking things. When you're buying a house, go to the house on the very day that you're buying the house, not the night before, not 2 days before because it's convenient. The very day, and check it right before you buy it. Because I sold a house to somebody once who checked it the night before, and we signed it in the day, and they went back in the evening when they owned the house, and it turned out that a leak had developed that had never been in the house before. It was a completely remodeled home in Alexandria. It had brand new hardwoods all through it. It completely flooded the whole house. And on the same day they bought the house, they filed an insurance claim for a total loss due to a broken pipe of all the flooring and walls and all that. So that's my only thought on it. You do have to check. Water is serious.
Not only that, but I feel like the best time, if you're buying a house, the best time to do a home inspection is that day when it's absolutely pouring down rain. So
Right.
look out for the weekly weather report, and whatever day it's supposed to rain, schedule your home inspection that day.
Let's close on that day.
That's another good water tip.
I bet you didn't tell Sandra that before she bought your house.
No, but I swear every time Sam and I met over there, it was raining.
Yeah, well, that's good. Was
Yeah.
it leaking? It wasn't leaking, was it?
No leaks, no leaks.
Yeah.
No, it has a new roof.
Because it's implicit in this discussion, but people may not know that if you close on the house, literally from that moment forward, the general rule is that all the problems are merged into the contract, and you can't look back and say, something that obviously started the day before you closed, you might even be able to prove it. It doesn't matter because that you're out of luck. So you really do have to check. And Sam, I can think of like half a dozen times you've told me stories of stuff has gone wrong.
It just happened a month ago, or a week ago, someone that one of our houses said that you were involved in, their HVAC went out 10 months later. They wanted, or 13 months later, they wanted a warranty from us and from the contractor. But I mean, the thing ran for a year. So
Was it brand new?
it was brand new. Yeah. So they have parts warranty from the manufacturer, but that's just the extent.
But let me ask another question. Remember, we were at the house over on Q, and we were talking about if something went wrong. It was just an example, not that anything's wrong with the Q house, but something when we were in the house, you were talking about you're liable, so somebody can come back and sue you, years later if something is wrong with that house, right? How is that different?
That's special.
So if you that's special. If you construct something improperly and you cheat the system, you don't do things to code, what have you, and then they can prove that and that you had knowledge of that, that's a different matter, right? Oh. So you sell them something to be defective and they come back and pursue you. That's hard to stand up against. You tell them, hey, the HVAC's fan blower burned out after a year. Well, I mean, that really doesn't have anything. There was nothing wrong. Sometimes things just don't go well with mechanical things.
Well, and that's right. It does vary by jurisdiction. DC is particularly protective about that. It even has some affirmative laws. I remember we knew somebody who the beam that went across the top to hold up the roof is supposed to sit on another beam basically, and it was off by 12 inches. It was floating in midair basically in drywall. And so obviously it was not constructed properly. Whereas like an HVAC system, who knows what happened? Somebody could have kicked it or just, the manufacturer did something. But the general rule is you're out of luck. It's more of some wacky structural thing and in some crazy jurisdiction. But all right, I screwed up Charlie before, so I'm gonna
be quiet too.
Yeah, shut up. All right, Charlie. I think Charlie's got a good one for this week.
I've got a good collective story for the group. So today's story is going to be about buying houses at courthouse auctions and some of the things that could go right or wrong and what you need to know. But this particular house that we purchased came up to the courthouse auction block. This was the third or fourth time that it had gone to auction. And so I was very familiar with the house just because it would come up for auction, and then the auction would get canceled. It would come up again, it would get canceled. And the reason why it kept getting canceled was because the owner would file a bankruptcy, a chapter, whatever, chapter 7 or a chapter 13, but then he would never file the paperwork to see the bankruptcy through. So the sale would get canceled, it would come back on, it would get canceled. Well, because I knew this house had come up and down so many times, in this case, I did a title search on the house. And what showed up on the title search was that there was only one owner on the house. And the owner of the house was male in statute. And so this is important for later on in the story. And so there was only one owner to the house.
And let me just interrupt there to say this is not like you didn't hire somebody to do a full title search. You just went to the website of the locality to see who was on the deed, or that's how you found it?
Well, this case I didn't even really do that. I just went to the land. So what I did is I went to the tax record. I saw who the owner was in the tax record, and then I went back to the land records. In this case, it was Prince William County because I have online access, and I just did what's called a deed search just to see if the title had transferred,
Right.
within the last couple of years, and the title had not transferred recently. So I knew that the owner had a male name. So then what happened is that because this house had come up and down so many times on the foreclosure, a lot of my competition knew this and nobody showed up to the foreclosure auction. So I was the only one that showed up to the foreclosure auction plus one other bidder. So it was just me and another bidder who showed up to the auction. Well, I knew the other bidder that showed up, and I know the type of properties that he bids on. So he's what's called a bottom feeder. So he'll bid on, maybe $200,000 properties or $250,000 properties. And so I know that for a deposit, the most he had was maybe $20,000. Well, in this case, you need 10% of the minimum bid or 10% of the note value, whichever is less. So in this case, the house was worth about $800,000 fixed up. The foreclosing loan amount was $420,297 because these guys had gotten an FHA loan. So at the minimum required deposit in the ad was $45,000 in order to bid at the auction. Well, I showed up with $50,000 because actually I showed up with $60,000 because the highest that we were going to bid on this house was about $600,000. So I needed 10% of, 600,000, which was 60,000, or whichever is lower, or 10% of 450,000, 45,000. And so I just made sure I showed up with enough money. So what happened was, so I show up at the auction, and I called out the other bidder. I told the auctioneer because the auctioneer was qualifying us to bid on the house. And so I made the auctioneer, so what I did is I stepped up to the auctioneer, I showed him my money to prove that I was a qualified bidder. And I said to the auctioneer, I said, you had better check this other bidder's money and deposit because I'm betting he's not qualified. So he got pissed off at me. The other bidder got pissed off at me because he knew he didn't have the required amount of money, but he was gonna prepare to bid me up. I said, oh, heck no, you need to check this guy's money. He didn't have the right amount of money. So as it turned out, I was the only bidder at the auction. So what happened was the house opened up at $493,624. I bid $1. The other guy couldn't bid because he wasn't a qualified bidder.
What do you mean you bid $1? Can you explain that?
So the opening bid was $423,624. I bid $1 more, $423,625. The auctioneer said going once, going twice, sold. So we ended up getting the house for $423,625 because the other bidder wasn't qualified. So as it turned out, I was the only bidder at the auction.
And just to clarify, when you say about money, obviously it's not bringing a bag of money. What do you have to bring in terms of money to be qualified like that?
All right. So in this case, what you need to do at the courthouse auctions is you need to bring cashier checks. And so the cashier checks need to be made out to your person. It can't be made
Charlie
out to
Einsman, it's made out
Charles Einsman. Yep. So
Mhm.
so then what I do is when we get the bid, I just turn the checks over endorse them to a third party, and they take the checks and they've got a 10% down payment. So in this case, I put up $50,000 in cashier checks that I signed over to the trustee, and the trustee went and immediately deposited those checks. Okay. This was a Tuesday. So then the auction was at 2:00. So then what I did is I had a feeling it was already occupied because, like I said, the house had come up and come down so many times, and I sort of knew it was occupied. The house is about 7,000 square feet, and so it's a very big house. 7,000 square feet, built in 2015, so it's a very new, brand new house. Keep in mind, after repair value is around 800,000, but that's neither here nor there. So then what I did is I went ahead and did an occupancy check after we sort of bid and won the auction, which for you guys out there, you should probably do an occupancy check before the auction to kind of make sure it's occupied or vacant, so you kind of know what you're up against going into it.
But especially now with COVID, if it's
Right.
occupied, it's going to take a way longer time. In
Right.
some jurisdictions, it took a long time before. Now it could be a year.
Well, what is
Right.
that? Well, what is an occupancy check? Is that something that you can purchase, like a service?
No, you physically drive by the house before the auction, and you just make sure it's occupied or not. I mean, it's easy to tell if it's vacant.
Look through the
Just for
windows?
example,
Look through the windows?
you can look through windows. There's a lot of reasons. There could be a combo box on there. The house could have been rekeyed. Usually we'll see a white sticker or a blue sticker or a sticker from a service maintenance company, a property preservation company on there. It's pretty, or the electrical meter could be pulled. There's a lot of different ways. The mailbox, don't quote me on this, but the mailbox could be full of mail, those kinds of things. Obviously no cars in the driveway, no cars in the parking spot. So there's a lot of ways to sort of tell whether or not it's occupied or vacant. Just yesterday alone, there was an auction that I went to and the property was vacant. How do I know this? There was a combo box on there and the house had been rekeyed. And oh, by the way, one of my keys worked, and so I got in the house. Don't have me arrested, but one of the fancy keys worked, as we had talked about in the previous podcast. So then what happened is it was a Tuesday, and so the auction was at 2:00. So after we got the bid, I went by the house and I checked the house, knowing fully that it was going to be occupied. There was no doubt in my mind. I knew it was going to be occupied, but I had got the house for such a low price that it didn't really matter. And also, too, it was pre-COVID. And so in the state of Virginia, it's fairly simple to evict an occupant out of the house. It takes maybe 90 days or less. Or like we like to do, we would just give it keys for cash. So it wasn't a big deal. So I show up armed with the fact that I'm going to do a keys for cash because I know it's occupied. I'm going to talk to the occupants. I'm sure they're nice and all. And so that's what I did. So I went by the house. I knocked on the door. As it turned out, the missus answered the door, and I talked to her, nice and polite. I said, "Hi, how are you?" I gave her my card. I'm Charlie Einsman. I gave her my card. I said, your house went to auction today, and we're the winning bidder at the auction. We were the successful bidder. She goes to me. She looks at me and she says, "Okay, thank you very much for coming by." She goes, "You're not buying this house." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Is there any reason why?" She goes, "Yeah." I said, she goes, "Yeah, well, I just filed a bankruptcy on Saturday. So that's going to go ahead and null and void the auction." So I didn't think anything of it. I didn't say anything to her. But I knew full and well that she was not on title and that her husband was on title and she wasn't on title. So I didn't say anything. I just gave her my card and said, "No problem. Let's just keep in touch. And maybe right. Maybe the sale's going to be null and void." I said, but I seriously doubt it. I didn't get into a conflict with her at all, knowing what I knew. I just left. And then what I did is I sort of turned it over to the lawyers being the substitute trustee, and let them know what she had told me. But at the same time, I told them that there is no way that you guys are going to cancel this auction because she filed bankruptcy. She is not on title. We're going through with the sale. And so then that's where enter Mr. Eddie G. And so Mr. Eddie G took over, and we fought this case in bankruptcy court. And so Eddie G, do you want to go ahead and start your part of the story?
Well, as usual, I'm like Sam. I'm sort of an extra thought on most of these things. Finding that finding that deal was key. And I before we get to any little part I had to play, but what's interesting about that, it reminds me of that one of the rare things that I bought at auction was doing that extra little bit of work. You know, following something repeated, it comes up, if there's bankruptcy, it comes up again, checking the title. Like the one time I checked the title on this weird one and saw that it had been released from a program that prevented its sale. You know, it makes you be the only bidder or one of few bidders. And in your case, because you made and you can do this, make the person qualified, because the importance of that can't be underestimated. That person could have bid it up to whatever, $600,000, $700,000, and you still may have won, but he ran it up $200,000 or something and ate all that profit up for nothing. Then when he shouldn't have been. So you can't be shy with these things, I guess.
No, he is still pissed off to me at this day, which I don't really care, right? But no, he would have cost us $100,000, if not more,
Easily,
because he would have bid it just because I was bidding, not because he knew anything about the property. But what happens lately is that the courthouse steps, they know if I know certain inside things about a house, they're going to bid just on top of me, just to bid, because they know I know what I'm doing. So this guy would have cost us at least $100,000, because in this particular case, our bid was going to go up to about $625,000, because I knew the house was built in 2015. The house was only 4 years old, and I knew who built the house, and I knew the kinds of upgrades that they put in these houses. And I knew for the most part the condition of the house was going to be really good. So we were going to bid it up to $625,000, and this guy would have ran me up $100,000. But because I made the auctioneer check the fact that he didn't have enough money on him to bid, I saved us quite a bit of money, not knowing that we were going to get caught up in a 6-9 month legal battle.
Right. Well, that was what was interesting about that. You'd think it would be fairly straightforward, because if I remember correctly, after you'd think I would have thought this through a little bit more. But as I recall, as you said, she was not on the title, but she had declared bankruptcy. Right. And normally, if the husband had declared bankruptcy, there'd be no question that it would have been stayed. And so when you go to a foreclosure auction, usually they'll check the auctioneer. Right. They'll check with the office, has bankruptcy been filed? No. But if they don't know and they miss it, which does happen, they say, oh, gee, we're going to have to give you back your checks.
Right. And in this case, he did file bankruptcy 3 times, and he was out of bankruptcy filings because he never saw it through.
He was doing what we call the bankruptcy boogie.
Oh, yeah, the bankruptcy boogie.
Yeah.
ZZ Top, the bankruptcy boogie.
So in the bankruptcy boogie, you declare bankruptcy, you stop a foreclosure. You wait the bank out till right before they do another foreclosure. And if it's long enough, you pull it again. But if it's not quite long enough and you want to play it out longer, you get your wife to do it. And then she pulls it back. It starts all over again.
Yep.
Right before the next one, your time is up. And then you throw the lever again. Now it takes the bank maybe 4 rotations through this circus before they call it quits and tell the judge, hey, this person is really a bad actor. Because if it's an investor, an individual investor, you call it out like day one. But if you're a sleeping bank, then you don't even notice. It just sort of enters the cycle. And we had a guy, he did 7 years in Old Town Alexandria. The meat is on the grill. That's what he would send us an email when he would
send emails, and he would want to meet me in Old Town Alexandria for a little wine, and let me know the meat's on the grill. And so once the foreclosure's scheduled, that's the meat on the grill. And then once he filed his bankruptcy, the meat's off the grill.
He had 7 years, no payments in $1 million townhouse. Wow. And he was so proud of it. He was so proud.
That's special. I mean, how much money can you save, in 7 years? Really?
He could walk to the water. It was beautiful.
Do the bankruptcy boogie.
Yeah, he did. He slipped on out of there. He got out on the last rotation.
He sure did. And so
Yeah.
in this case, though, this guy had IRS liens. He had everything doing that bankruptcy boogie.
No, he was doing everything.
And his poor wife didn't know any better.
No.
And so he had her file bankruptcy. And the funny thing about it is that the city of Alexandria Courthouse was literally like 6 blocks away from him. So he would just show up on a nice sunny day, file that PK, go right back home.
Or
9
have
months
stop
goes
for
by.
a drink.
Yep. Call me for some wine. Let's go have some wine. 9 months goes by. Wifey's okay, wifey, it's your turn to go file a bankruptcy. She would saunter her way onto the courthouse. She would file her bankruptcy. Another 9 months to a year goes by. Meat would be back on the grill. Oh, his turn to file. He would go file. And they would never
There
file.
seems to be like we could have a whole nother podcast on how to beat the system.
Well, it doesn't help our side of it.
You beat it for only so long.
Between you three, we could have a whole podcast. On how
Well,
to beat
actually, from being on this side of it, you see the ways to do it. And I know our listeners right now are thinking, well, that can't be right. There's got to be a law that stops this from happening because, you could do this indefinitely. Well, the problem is, like most things, there is a law, but kind of like, killing people's against the law. But if nobody actually arrests you and does anything about it, you can keep doing it. And so in the bankruptcy code, it's and also there's rules. They're there for a good reason. So somebody files a bankruptcy and they realize, well, I don't really qualify, or I can resolve my debts privately. They file it and then they just drop the bankruptcy, and all you lose is a couple $100 filing fee. And it's fine. It bought you a couple weeks to figure things out. Nothing wrong with that. Or you even file a bankruptcy and you go through some of the process. If you don't file all the different forms, well, let me back up. You can file bankruptcy literally by just filing bankruptcy for the most part. And again,
And pay the money.
Pay the money, pay the filing fee, and that's it. And this is a good point to drop in again. I am a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. This varies a lot by jurisdiction, but generally speaking, in the federal court, you just file. Now, there's a lot of forms and things you have to do after that, and the bankruptcy court will say, "Hey, Ed Grass, you filed bankruptcy, but you didn't file all those forms," and then ultimately the court will just dismiss the case if you don't do anything. So, but there are rules then. You pretty much can file your first bankruptcy and let it drop. Generally speaking, you can file your second bankruptcy and let it drop. But there is a rule that after repeat bankruptcies within a certain period of time, I'm forgetting if it's 6 months or a year or 2 years, there's all different sorts of rules. Then there starts to be a presumption of abuse. Yeah. That the person is not doing it for the right reason that's allowed. Well, okay, but who's going to point that out? I think one of you guys said that the bank is sound asleep. They've got 5,000 of these. I don't know, huge numbers of these things, particularly back during the foreclosure crisis. And so if nobody actually says this to the court, that this is an abuse, to stop it, it can keep going. And then of course, in this actual case that we're talking about, the gentleman, the husband, had filed several bankruptcies before and was getting close to that point where
he was at that point. He was maxed out.
Was he? I couldn't remember.
He was maxed out. He did 3 to be exact.
Was it 3? And right.
3.
And typically, I think your third one is where now there's a presumption the court's going to toss it out. So the bank can in fact sleep. But going back to the husband-wife thing, if you space them out enough, if the bank is slow enough on the foreclosure, you can get past that so many say 3 and 2 years or whatever it is, and re-up that number. Now, if somebody comes in and says, look, over the last 6 years, there've been 7 bankruptcies across a husband and a wife, the court will knock that out, but you've got to file a motion and do all of this. So that's why they figured in this case that why not have her file? I'm guessing that I don't know that was their thing.
Oh, they were just starting the bankruptcy boogie, but they only got they only got to the first part of the dance.
Yeah, but here's the problem, though. Going into the auction, the substitute trustee did check Pacer. I know they did because they called in that right at 2:00 and said, "Are we clear for sale?" And whoever was behind the desk, the paralegal, whoever, said, yes, you are, because it hadn't showed up in Pacer because the guy had filed a couple times. And they knew that there was only one person on title. So they cleared it for sale. And then that's when I did the OC check and found out that she had filed 2 days previous. And so that's when we started telling the substitute trustee that we are buying this house.
Right, because their
What was
normal
their claim?
their normal thing is the substitute trustee would just say, okay, there's a bankruptcy, we'll put it back up for auction again. But by you telling them, wait a second, we have a valid contract here from the auction, don't just pull it and put it back up like you normally would. This is a situation where we can get this knocked out. Also, just quickly for our newer listeners, Pacer is an online system that you can search at least for free to see if a bankruptcy case or a lawsuit has been filed. So, and that's free at least to search for that initial information.
In federal court, right? In federal court.
Federal court nationwide. So you could put in, Thomas J. Jones and Mary L. Jones, and certainly you might find 5 or 6 of those people, but none in your local jurisdiction. Well, then they must not have filed bankruptcy and you're good to go. So these trustees will do that. In this case, and I'm making up those names, they must have searched for Thomas L. Jones on the title. Nope, he's not there. Go ahead and sell it. And it turned out that Mary L. Jones had actually filed the bankruptcy. So
But Mary L. Jones wasn't on the title, was she?
Was not on the title. So the fact that she filed bankruptcy, you would think would be irrelevant. And that was Charlie's point to the trustee. Hey, I've got a binding contract here that you, the trustee, have to honor. Because when you at a foreclosure sale, when you're the high bidder and you hand over those checks, you have a binding contract that you can enforce to get that house. And conversely, the trustee has a binding contract to sell you the house. So if you don't buy the house, usually within whatever the 14-day timeline is, you don't show up with that money, they keep those nice certified checks. So if Charlie turned over roughly $50,000 in checks and didn't close, bye $50,000. The bank gets to keep that, and they're going to put it up for auction.
Poofery. That's called poofery. Poof, poof, poof.
Well, haven't you had some competitors in some cases they've just dropped their 20 grand? They're like, oops, I bid way too much for this house. I better walk away.
Got another great story. I got another great story when we're finished with this one.
Okay, yeah, mark that down because we've watched money burn before, but here
I've got another phenomenal story.
Yeah, so here you would think, well, you're fine and dandy. But of course, the trustee is nervous because they don't want to get sued for having violated the bankruptcy stay. The reason the foreclosure gets canceled by a bankruptcy is federal law says you have to stop all collection activities against somebody's assets because they're now subject to bankruptcy court. And that's why the foreclosure gets stopped. Well, if the bank went ahead and closed with you on your foreclosure purchase, they could get sued for punitive damages if they did it in violation of the bankruptcy stay. So they figured, and you figured, well, we better go get this all blessed by the bankruptcy court and say, boy, that should just take 5 minutes, right? I mean, but it didn't really end up taking 5 minutes. Because there were a lot of legal questions.
That was called Baby Belle Isle.
Right. And the problem with
9 months.
Was that how long it took? Yeah.
I don't know. I call it Baby Belle Isle. 9 months.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It just shows you how litigation can be very unexpected. What's that, Sam?
Ed, you spent hundreds of hours.
No. It was probably 5 hours. It wasn't very much.
What? I mean, I was on the stand for more than 5 hours.
It was 6 months to be exact.
I was on the stand in the federal court for a full day.
It was 6 months. It was
longer than 5 hours, Ed.
That was 6 months. It was February 2019 to end of August 2019. So 6 months.
Yeah, it was 5 minutes. It was not hard, but
5 minutes and a lot of.
The chair is in a fixed position when you're on the stand. So you can't adjust the chair all day long. You're sitting at the edge of the seat to keep the microphone close to your mouth.
Well, this is actually there's a couple interesting things about this. So you would think it would be very simple to get this sort of thing declared and over with, but certainly the parties were sympathetic, and they say, well, maybe it was a good faith mistake and you should let the guy file bankruptcy, and well, the sale hasn't gone through. So if the bankruptcy happens now, then that means it's okay, and that therefore the contract's not binding. And so any kind of decent lawyer can throw up a lot of dust, or throw a lot of, if you have a good argument, you argue that, and if you have good legal argument or good facts, you argue that. But if you have nothing, you just throw sand in the system, or you take a big handful of sand and throw it in somebody's eyes. And the situation, I think, why this ultimately the court did the right thing legally was these individuals didn't have the funds to save the house, right? If this contract had gotten canceled, which the judge in bankruptcy court has an enormous amount of discretion, and also just the time and appeals and whatever. But I think ultimately he was persuaded that they had enough other debts that eventually this house was going to go anyway. It was not.
And they really couldn't afford it. And I think at the end of, I don't remember, but I think at the end of the court case, didn't we end up giving them the keys for cash anyway?
Yes. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Like 10 grand or something.
Right. Because, and this is why you guys are good at this stuff, and I think you have such a good reputation. Most of the people who buy houses at all, actually, I don't know. I don't know if I can characterize it, but a lot of people who do this are going to look at every last dollar they can get. And, you could have just litigated and got these people out and just taken your lumps on the timing. And you tried, I think, fairly early on to give them significant amount of keys for cash, which again, you don't want lawyers, to our listeners, you don't want lawyers billing you and taking time. And even if that's not that much, that's the expense of the lawyer. It's the time. You have to wait for the motions. You have to wait for the hearing. You have to wait for the judge. Even very quick, and bankruptcy court moves much quicker than normal courts. So time is money, so you might be, even though they technically had no legal right, you might want to give somebody like this $20,000 just a short, why not pay whatever you'd pay the lawyer or whatever you'd pay for holding costs just to get the thing done. The people are a lot happier, whatever. So even at the end of this, after you had litigated the whole thing, you still ended up giving them keys for cash. Yep. It was a nice thing to do. These are very nice people. B, from a purely economic standpoint, they're not going to feel like ripping cabinet doors off or lighting the rug on fire because you've been such jerks about it. But mostly but to help these people move and whatever else, it's always better. And here's the litigator in me: don't litigate people if you can avoid. Try to find some resolution and do it up front. A lot of people will they end up settling it after 6 months of litigation. They end up paying the money that if they'd paid that money before the 6 months of litigation, they'd be a lot happier economically. So don't get your
saying, Ed, though, what you're saying is that before or prior to going through the 6 months of litigation, that couple could have just said, okay, we'll let the house go. Charlie could have given them the cash for keys, the $20,000 then, or whatever it is. And they could have been gone.
Right.
Yeah. But in this case, they thought
they don't want
they thought they were in the 100% right. They thought they were 100% right, that they didn't see this coming. They thought that filing another bankruptcy because of, I think, marital property law or something like that. I don't even know if they were thinking about it, but I honestly think that they thought that by her filing bankruptcy, they were good. They were in the clear. Right. They didn't know that this was coming.
So you don't think they were trying to get 6 months out of the house plus your
No, they didn't know this was coming. They really thought they were going to save their house. They really did.
They were unsophisticated when they purchased the house. They got led into a loan that they couldn't afford, and then the closing couldn't happen with both parties on it because the wife did have poor or impaired credit, and so she took herself off. She claimed she didn't know that she was off of the deed, and then it ended up just being her husband's house.
Wow.
They knew full well that she was off of the deed because there was
Yeah,
written
because it only would've- it
documentation
only would've-
showing it.
Mhm.
So she did know it, and this was like their sixth home that they had owned, and they had moved up to obviously 7,000 feet. It's a lot of space.
A lot of home.
It's a lot of home, and then there was really no cause to that deal, that they had done well, generally speaking, economically, and we're just in a home that was somewhat smaller, and they wanted to have a large home, and can't
what
blame them for
happens-
wanting a big home, but not at the expense of not having a home.
What happens for the 6 months that, Charlie, your money is tied up? So your 50,000 is tied up. You don't have the house. You're going through, so these legal actions, you're paying for a lawyer. You didn't get the $499 lawyer, I'm sure. So what's happening to you? What's happening?
We
to
got
you
the
guys?
$1,000. We got the $1,000 an hour lawyer. This isn't called legal aid or legal
Well,
help.
what happens to me as an investor? Where do I stand now?
Well, that's just the cost of doing business. Now for us, I mean, the $50,000 being held is one thing, right? But the cost that we didn't consider was obviously the legal cost and the time value of money cost, right?
Right.
A lot of times when you're bidding on these houses at the courthouse steps, you're going to incur costs that are hidden that you don't even know about. And so, we never thought we were going to incur that kind of a cost, but that's how it went.
And then
Right,
didn't we at the end have someone ask us to pay for the taxes or something from
the HOA fee.
The HOA fee.
Before
We had to
the
pay
HOA fee,
the HOA fee from the day of the auction,
HOA lien too? Wow.
No,
even though
bef-
we didn't get the HOA monthly. We had to pay from the day of the auction, even though we couldn't close on it and get title. They said we were on the hook and they were going to fight it, and blah blah blah. And so we eventually just threw up our hands.
Yeah,
Right,
so, I mean,
because it was something like what, $2,000 or something, and
yeah,
again,
something.
that's a perfect example. I think you were 100% right that you didn't owe it, but how much money do you want to spend to save $2,000?
Right.
If you can write a letter or two as an investor, fine. But the reality is just pay the $2,000 and move on. What's particularly here, there's plenty of margin on the deal. And that's why what you're talking about, Sandra, if the margin was lower on the foreclosure deal, Charlie or any investor might have said, forget it.
Right.
I'm not going to mess
Yeah,
with it.
we would have walked away. We would have said, "Hey, substitute trustee, they filed a bankruptcy. Give us our money back. We're rolling down the road."
Oh, that was an option.
It could have been an option because we could have
Yeah.
easily convinced that substitute trustee, "Hey, there was a BK filing by the wife. We think there should be a stay here. Send us our money back," and they probably would have.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because banks tend to be very conservative about
Yeah.
that stuff. The people who tell the substitute trustee what to do. But this is why, and this is actually a great lesson, and it, just a general principle. And I'm telling you, as a litigator, I used to do multi-million, even multi-billion-dollar cases at the big law firm. And you would think these sophisticated clients who'd been through litigation or had big lawyers would sit down at the beginning and value the case. This is going to cost me $1 million in legal fees. This is going to cost the other side $1 million in legal fees. Is there a minimum just to get an answer? Is there a way we can solve this? And not even just for the legal fee saving, but the risk, right? There's a risk of losing. And so you've spent $1 million and you lose everything, whatever the claim is. So all those business people out there, Sam and Charlie are very smart, rational business actors. They try to be nice, like helping these people with cash for keys when legally they didn't have to at all. But even more importantly, from a business perspective, you have to sit and think, is this worth my time? Is it worth having my money tied up? What's the end result I can get? And usually there's a number where you can resolve that. There's the other house we had in DC where there were the people who weren't on title or whatever, and they could have had $50,000 up front. You guys would have paid them $50,000 for cash for keys. They understandably, for whatever reason, they didn't want to do that, but they, and this is the other point, they didn't really appreciate their position, and their lawyer didn't do a good job of explaining it. The lawyer made them think, well, you can get $200,000 out of this, not $50,000, because of all these other things. And he was wrong. And now there, he just made a mistake based on their factual circumstance. For these individuals we're talking about today, first they were kind of not the lawyers that they had in bankruptcy. So some earlier sort of alleged lawyers had given them bad advice about how to file bankruptcy and who could do it or what. And then the lawyers they had didn't really just tell them, look, you're going to lose this at the end of the day. Maybe you'd be better to try to settle this. And you guys tried throughout to settle it, but they couldn't. And also, and it's totally understandable. It's very emotional. It's your house. It's you've lived there, and they were taken advantage, I think, by some builders. And so try to be as rational as you can as investors. I mean, for you guys, it should just be a money question. And also so you can sleep at night.
Just get this thing resolved quickly and not go to court. End of story. I mean, it's that simple.
Before you've gone to court, you might think that you'd want to go to court to straighten out your matters. You hear people say, oh, I'm going to go to court and sue you. It does not take a long time in court to recognize that's not a good approach.
Well, you learned it, Sam. You were starting to say how you sat in the witness chair on this one, and some of the other ones you've had to sit up there in front of a federal judge and answer questions and get cross-examined, and all that stuff is not very fun. And as I always say, stealing a line from the song War that Springsteen and others have covered, and Bob Marley, war is only good for the undertaker. So litigation is only good for the lawyer, and maybe also the undertaker. So it's a lot of fun for lawyers and litigators to do this stuff. If you like this time of work, it is terrible for everybody else, and including
people are actually paying.
People are paying, and paying by your time. I mean, a day of Sam's time to sit in a courthouse and wait to testify is a day he's not out, limiting the loss of money. Whereas, Charlie, if he spends a day in court, he can't be at the auctions or all of the 900 other ways he tries to save
not knowing
money.
how much money we're not making. That's fine.
I know, it's painful.
Anyway, so the story ended up turning out really well. We sold the house. And so for you guys out there, if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, please send us an email. It's above us. It's at yourstory@basementtales.com. yourstory@basementtales.com with 2 T's. So please reach out to us. Send us your stories. Send us your comments. Send us a topic you might want us to talk about in the future. And thank you very much for listening.